All right, thanks for joining me for what I hope is going to be a very educational series of videos. Ostensibly, what I'm doing here is I'm putting together a course where I'm going to teach you how to read the literature in the context of health, nutrition type research, with the idea in mind, the goal in mind, that by the end of this course, you will be able to deal with folks that want to wave a paper in front of you and say, look, here's a paper that absolutely proves X, Y, or Z in the way that I deal with it. Not necessarily with the degree of, shall we say, abrasiveness or vim that I tend to do online from time to time. More in that I will give you the skills to dispassionately pull these papers to pieces so that, well, A, you'll always win that debate for what that's worth, but mainly, B, you will have these skills, you will have this confidence with the science, you will be able to never yourself ever again be fooled or not know what to do when somebody waves one of these papers in front of you. This video is an introductory video. It's going to be publicly available for people to view so that they can decide whether or not they want to invest the very small amount of money that will be involved in getting them access to the whole course. To get access to the whole course, you'll need to join my Patreon system at the $10 a month or above tiers, the Seekers of Knowledge tier it's called, and that will get you access to the instructional videos proper. The address for getting to my Patreon system is wending its way across the bottom of the screen, and it will be throughout this video. So you go there, you select Join Patreon, go to the $10 US a month or above levels, join there, you will get access to this course. All right, so what I'm going to do in this video by way of introduction is I'm going to run through a paper that purports a certain thing, but actually is not what it might appear to be to the untrained eye. And I'm without giving you the instruction, without giving you these are the skills, whatever else, I will give you my take on this paper so that you will see where I'm coming from a bit, and so that you will know that these are skills that you must learn for yourself, because you can. Anybody can learn the skills that I've got in terms of the way of looking at this material, if you should be so interested in doing. Okay, so without further ado, let's crack on. I'll introduce this paper. It's our favourite paper from the folks at the European Consensus Panel on Atherosclerotic Disease, or whatever they call themselves. It's a paper that is often put forward, or at least parts of this paper taken out of this paper and splashed up on the screen for a few seconds, or waved in front of you for a few seconds to absolutely prove the point, prove you wrong, and aren't you silly for ever doubting it. Yeah, so we'll go through the paper and see whether it's able to do what it claims that it's able to do. So, in no particular order of anything, this is just how I think about such a thing when it's put in front of me. In no particular order, here are the thoughts on this paper, just off the top of my head, shall we say. Number one, when someone splashes this paper up on the screen and says, look, here is absolute proof that low-density lipoproteins cause atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. It says that right in the title. Low-density lipoproteins cause atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, it says. Okay, so number one, the required disciplines of science, the epistemological standards of science, if you want to talk about cause and effect relationships, the required level of investigation is this: a properly designed, properly powered, properly randomized, properly observed, properly disciplined, experimental, interventional research project where every other potential cause of confounding by way of covariates, collinearities, general confounders to the outcome variables are controlled absolutely from the outset before data is collected, under control and observation. That's not my standard. Those are not my rules. The epistemology of science as we understand it, by way of making cause and effect inferences, was put in place more than 2,500 years ago. I'm not that old. Okay? These are not my rules. These are the rules. Does this paper present any properly controlled, properly randomized, properly powered, properly tenured, properly observed, disciplined, research, interventional, experimental studies conducted under the appropriate disciplines in the epistemology of science to talk about the relationship between one factor and another with any sense of being able, being competent, being capable of informing us in any way on cause or effect? The answer is no. What is this paper? This paper is, here it is there at the top right hand of the screen in bold red text. This is current, as of 2017, opinion. This is an opinion piece. It says so. It's not an experiment. It doesn't prove the point. So the opinion of these authors is that low-density lipoproteins cause atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, for which they propose that this is part one in a part two series of papers that will present evidence. Well, I've already outlined the level, the requirement, the epistemology, the standards required of evidence for cause and effect. It does not exist anywhere on this planet. It did not in 2017, and it doesn't still. Neither will it ever. Those standards cannot be met practically, financially, or ethically. Ethics committees hate research that's interventional research done on human beings. You can't experiment on human beings. Sorry about that, not sorry. Those are just the rules. This is a theology. This is an opinion piece. It's clearly disclaimed, actually, if you want to have a look here. Look, current opinion. All right? What underpins that opinion, I wonder? That's my next thought when I see a paper like this. Here's an opinion that strongly states an opinion. People that strongly state opinions generally have a reason for strongly stating that opinion. Shall we scan through? I'll get to this chart later on in the video. This is hilarious. You'll love it. Here we go. Conflict of interest statement from the members of the Consensus Panel on Atherosclerotic Disease, the European Consensus Panel. Starts here. Conflict of interest. These are monies paid to these authors by pharmaceutical companies that make drugs that lower the thing that they're claiming causes a problem, cause and effect, and ergo needs to be reduced, to reduce your risk of something or other. We'll get to that. Anyway, here is the conflict of interest, the thing that underpins this opinion. And over the page, all the way to here. There it is. Conflict of interest statement. Just before the reference section, which starts there. Goodness gracious. So I wonder if there's any reason, by way of millions of dollars being represented there in that conflict of interest statement, money's being paid to these authors by statin-producing companies who want you all to believe absolutely that low-density lipoproteins cause atherosclerotic disease, which is a statement made in the title of the paper, however, disclaimed somewhat up here in the top right-hand corner. Disclaimed entirely, in fact, as an opinion. We're done. We don't even need to look at the thing. But I'm going to a bit, because there are a few more things that jump out of this paper straight away And the reason I'm going to do that in this introductory video is so that you all can see that you need to learn this stuff. You need to join my Patreon. You need to learn how to see this stuff and to pick it out of a paper like this and go, oh, well, there's your problem. Okay? So really, the main thing that gets pulled out of this opinion piece and put up on the screens in social media videos and things, etc., is this chart here, isn't it? You've all seen it, probably, and if you haven't, where have you been? This is a chart that purports to absolutely prove the point. This is the summary of all the evidence, really, that proves the point made by this paper, so-called. What we have here is 3 data sets. For those that are viewing in colour and can see colour, we have a red data set, a grey data set, and a blue data set. This represents 3 different sorts of studies that have been undertaken in an attempt to elucidate the relationship between LDL and atherosclerotic disease. These are associative data sets. This is associated with that by some function. So, lesson number 1 in the epistemology of cause and effect science inference. Actually, anyone that goes to a relatively decent, competent school will learn this in the first half an hour of their first undergraduate degree, before anything else, pretty much, whereby the lecturer will stand up in front of the class and say, I want you to write this down, class, and I want you all to write this down, and underline it 3 times, and read it as many times as you need to until it goes in. Here it is. Association can not inform on cause, comma, nor effect, period. Okay? We're done. These are associative charts. An associative chart, this is associated with that, is able to give us some idea of the predictive value of X versus Y for the population studied at that time, those people, retrospectively. It cannot inform on what might happen in any other group of people in the future at all. This is only a retrospective view of something that may or may not have actually even gone on, as it turns out. So let's deal with the data sets here. There are 3 of them. There are 3 tiers of them, which are being deemed to be the lowest, the middle, and the highest so-called form of evidence for this causal relationship, despite the fact that still associations cannot inform on cause, comma, nor effect, period. Let's have a look at them. Number 1, on the x-axis at the bottom, we have magnitude of exposure to lower LDL-C. Lower than what? Lower than the baseline at the beginning of the measurement period? Probably, is what is inferred. In 2 of these 3 data sets, a measurement of, not even a measurement, a laboratory-produced estimate of LDL is the baseline starting point. And at the end point, I presume, they've taken another estimate at that time. Pretty granular, really. One at the beginning, one at the end. And then it says magnitude of exposure. Well, hang on a minute, because this red data set, the one that's at the lowest tier there, the one that's at the bottom of these 3 data sets, suggests that we have randomized controlled trials of various drugs that are designed to reduce cholesterol and therefore LDL in the blood plasma of people, which they effectively do. I'm not suggesting that the drugs don't do what they say they do. They do. They absolutely do reduce the LDL in the blood. However, number 1, is that the cause of any difference in disease outcomes? Well, we can't establish that from an association. Number 2, it says randomized controlled trials, median follow-up of 5 years. Well, I can assure you, dear viewers, that there are no studies extant anywhere in the literature that have ever been undertaken by any researchers anywhere on this planet where any number of people were locked in a laboratory 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 5 years or longer in order to establish that there was a cause and effect artifact at play here. Because that's what you need to do. That is the epistemological standard. It is not practical. It is not ethical. It is not financially viable. Ergo, it has not been done. So sorry about that. Secondly, what we have is a number of studies here. Each one of these sets of 2 red data points indicates a before and after situation. I think it is. Well, they're the average values from those studies, with no indication of the variability of the data points from the people in those studies around those data points given on this chart. Ergo, this chart is epistemologically unacceptable, statistically misleading and unacceptable, and anti-scientific in the extreme. Secondly, the level of residuals around this trend line, the error around the trend line, the spread of the red data points around the line that's drawn through the middle of them, looks to me like I would be very surprised if the R-squared value is much more than about 0.49, which means its predictive capacity is really pretty poor indeed, if it's even that high. It may be as low as 0.3 something, just looking at it visually. I have to make an estimate because on this chart here, it absolutely proves cause and effect apparently. There is absolutely no indication of the R-squared values of any one of the 3 data sets being shown on this chart. The very thing that would be required to give us an idea of its veracity, meaning, predictive capacity, etc. It's not there. Isn't that interesting? Further to that, we have a problem where there is extrapolation of the trend line to the left of the lowest data point shown and to the right of the highest data point shown. That is epistemologically, statistically inappropriate. You cannot extrapolate beyond the data that you've actually collected and predict what data would be at different values, especially considering such a weak association in the case of the red data set that we're talking about at the moment. Also, we are assuming that the intercept of this trend line has to be at x equals 0, y equals 0, which is not correct in reality in which we find ourselves either. Why would it be, necessarily? It could well be very, very different to that, and you could still get a trend line with the same or better level of residuals that would still fit. Let's add another factor to this as well. If you look at the y-axis, the one that goes up and down, you'll see that it's a logarithmic scale, meaning that actually these straight lines represent curves. And as such, we are misrepresenting the data set by suggesting that the variance when the value of LDLC gets higher towards the right is less than what it is around this curvilinear line. It makes it look less. Even so, it still looks pretty easily dismissed as being of any real prognostic or predictive value, even if it was a cause and effect artifact, which it isn't because it's an association. So that's a problem. This data set looks to me, and actually all 3 data sets look to me like they ought to have been log transformed before reporting on the meaning of any association. That hasn't been done. That's statistically inappropriate, epistemologically inappropriate, and it's basically misleading in the extreme. It's dreadful. Really bad. Anti-science. This is propaganda, is what we're looking at here. Okay? So there is that. That deals with the 5-year so-called randomised, which they weren't, so-called controlled, which they weren't, trials over 5 years. Done. That data set is of no value, and it's associative in the first instance, so it's a joke. The next level up is the grey data set in the middle, with the grey line that runs through the middle of the three lines there. And this purports to be prospective cohort studies with a mean follow-up period of 12 years. Well, prospective cohort study is a bit of a misnomer, actually, because prospective infers that they are able to infer a person's prospects going forward from this point on the basis of this data, which is funny because this data is retrospective. It talks about what did already happen in a given population of folks that were assessed at the time that this study was undertaken, over the 12 years that it was undertaken. So that's a problem. All the things I've just said about the red trend line are also true on the grey figure, because it's on the same graph with the same logarithmic scale, the same lack of log transformation, the same, well, slightly less actual. It's a slightly better apparent correlation, but it's only an apparent correlation. And even if it was a very good or even perfect correlation, that still can't inform us on cause nor effect, because remember, associations cannot inform on cause, comma, nor effect, period. A follow-up period of 12 years, and it talks about the magnitude of exposure to lower LDL-C in millimoles per litre on the x-axis. Well, in those 12 years, did they have a continuous LDL in the plasma monitoring going on in any of those subjects, let alone all of them? Did they get an area under the curve? No. We are expected to assume that their LDL-C level was rock solid before this intervention and rock solid at a different value afterwards and didn't vary at all, even though it's been shown at least n equals 1 in a relatively anti-scientific, ridiculous piece of claptrap published by Nick Norwitz recently that suggests that you can change your LDL-C level quite significantly, quite meaningfully, just by changing your diet. It doesn't change anything else, does it? So if you're going to talk about magnitude of exposure to LDL-C over time, 12 years in this case is what they're inferring, then you need to give us the areas under the curves for every one of those subjects. Every one of the 403,501 of them, I think it says there. Sorry, the figures are quite small, hard to read. I think that's what it says. Do you have 403,501 areas under the curve of relatively non-granular, pretty continuous plasma monitoring of LDL-C levels in those people at that time over those 12 years? No, we're done. This is a fabrication. This is a propaganda chart. This is a pretty piece of graphical disinformation that purports to show something it does not and cannot show. So we're done with the grey one as well. That's of no value to us whatever. Let's move on to what they tell us, those folks that want to tell us that this is the absolute slam dunk, they say. They go, oh yes, but the Mendelian randomization, though, is what they say. Look how close to the trend line the Mendelian studies show the relationship between magnitude of exposure to LDL-C and these various different SNPs are. Absolutely proving their point, cause and effect, they say. Oh, well, that's interesting, because the number of times that LDL is measured, or even estimated by the thing that the labs do, which is actually an estimate, not a measurement anyway, but the number of times that any one of the subjects in these Mendelian studies had their LDC even estimated, let alone actually measured, was none. None at all. Here's what they did. They said, oh, well, we have found in previous studies that these SNPs are associated with certain reductions in the average level of LDL-C taken on any one given occasion in individuals. Ergo, we can apply an LDL-C level to all these participants without ever testing it, not even once, and to say that's what it is. Then we can look at the disease prevalence, and that proves our point. Good sciencing. No. If you want to talk about the relationship between two variables, even as an association, let alone a cause and effect artifact, which association still can't do, you would need to measure both of those variables. So magnitude of exposure to lower LDL-C in millimoles per litre would have to have been measured. Not one of these three data sets has in fact done that. No measurement has been taken of the magnitude of exposure, the area under the curve of non-granular continuous monitoring of a person's LDL-C in their plasma at any time. This is a fantasy. This is a fabricated data set shown graphically. It proves absolutely nothing whatsoever. And again, you can apply all the same criticisms of this being a log linear chart and a lack of log transformation that would be required to make a meaningful statement around the residuals around this trend line. This is an absolute obfuscation of objective reality. This is a complete abandonment of the epistemological standards of science or of statistical inference in any way, shape or form. This is tantamount to criminal malpractice as a scientist, both by the authors of this paper and by the journal that published it and the editor that published it. All the authors of this paper ought to be disallowed from ever producing another piece of peer-reviewed literature in any journal anywhere in the world, in my opinion. That's my opinion piece. Further to that, the editor of the journal that published this ridiculous, nonsensical claptrap ought to be removed as an editor of this journal and any other journal that they may be an editor in currently. Further, they should be disallowed from ever serving as an editor in any journal again. That's my opinion. And thirdly, this journal, the European Heart Journal, ought to close its doors, stop publishing this journal, after writing a letter of apology to the scientific community and the lay community for this disgraceful anti-scientific garbage that had no place ever being published. The single most culpable criminal, in my mind, of this entire procedure is one Brian A. Ference, the lead author of this paper. Absolutely disgraceful. Right, there it is. That's my introduction to, that's the way we think about dealing with papers that are put in front of us to absolutely prove a point. I will give you all the skills throughout the course, as I said, so that you can make these assessments for yourself and you can immediately have these thought processes for yourself, so that never again, A, are you stuck for what to say when someone waves one of these papers in front of you. I'm going to give you 5 questions during the course that you ask about every paper, that once you've got, if you even get to question 5, you'll be done with the debate. You'll have absolutely put this person in their place and they will withdraw and stop talking, which is what you want, because you actually want these people to stop with their nonsense. Right, so those are the skills you'll get in the course. I hope that this is enough for you to decide, yes, I want to know how to do this, I want to know what these skills are, I want to get as confident as my good self is. The way to do that, as I said at the beginning, is to join my Patreon system at the $10 a month US level or above. The first video will be up there in the Patreon system in the course in the next week. And there'll be a weekly video thereafter until we're done with the course on how to read, interpret, and dismiss pseudoscientific claptrap when it's put in front of you. All right? Hope to see you there. Even if you just want to support what I'm doing and you don't really want to watch the course, that'll be fine. You can still go and join the Patreon at that level. You'll have access to it, but you don't have to watch it. Maybe you'd like to do that. That'd be awesome. I'll take the money. All right. Just like these folks did, really. Only I won't tell you lies once I've taken your money. These people took some money though, didn't they? Remember that from the beginning? Hilarious. Okay, see you then. Hope you enjoy the course and I hope you see the value in it. See you around the traps.